Good morning, Jason.
You said this was an emergency. What's up?
It really is. I have an important story, but first, I need you to prove to me that you're human.
Andrew, you called me.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Just click on all the images that feature an axolotl playing a flugelhorn.
How the fuck do you have so many photos of a salamander playing a flute? Welcome to another episode of Seemingly Unrelated. I am Jason Heat, writer, director, producer, and professional wrestling commentator and creative.
And I'm Dr. Andrew Johnstone, lecturer in digital content management at King's College London.
But he is so much more. Professor Andrew Johnstone's mind is able to connect the dots of the seemingly unrelated elements of our lives and history, exploring the profundity of the mundane and taking us all on a journey that we hope you will find at least moderately fascinating when it's done. Every episode, he picks a topic. You nor I know what it is. So let's go for a ride. He's in Scotland. I'm in Washington, D.C. You're wherever you are. But Andrew, where are we going today?
Jason, what do you know about CAPTCHA?
CAPTCHA is the thing that is making sure that I'm a human. And when I have to refresh it, I feel less than.
You are 100% correct. CAPTCHA, which is, my friend, an acronym, meaning completely automated public Turing test to tell computers and humans apart. CAPTCHA. Really, really grody, forced acronym on that one. It doesn't even technically fit all the letters. But anyway, that's what CAPTCHA is. And have you ever asked yourself the question, why? What is the function of CAPTCHA?
Well, first, no idea that was an acronym. Thought it was just like a funny way of being like, we gotcha, we captured your information. Like I thought, CAPTCHA, capturing you. But no, it's like SHIELD. I think of it like concert tickets where if not, people would be able to get like every front row seat. And then those of us who are the norms would have to pay on the aftermarket significant amounts.
Right, exactly. You know, it is a spam filter, effectively. It's to keep bots from logging in, because it's very easy, of course, to train a bot to sign up for an account for anything. But these little strange changes that CAPTCHA provides are specifically designed to interfere with artificial intelligence and its ability to solve problems. So, for example, in the traditional CAPTCHA that you mentioned, where you've got sort of swirling letters and numbers, it's looking for T. And when it looks for T, it's expecting like the sharp ends to be in the exact positions that makes a T, like an uppercase T.
So it's looking for a cross.
Yeah. So if you simply bend that T at like a 45-degree angle at the top, it's like, well, I don't know what the hell that is. That's something else altogether. And of course, more recently, right, you've probably had to do like pick out the fire hydrants or identify the motorcycles.
And then you go, okay, the thing about those questions are always like, obviously I know what a motorcycle is, but then in the moment you're like, but is there something about this that's a motorcycle that I'm not like obviously I know what the traffic light is, but this little part of the corner, will I be penalized? Somehow when you add a test to something, it really questions your ability to feel confident about anything that you know.
So with CAPTCHA, it's keeping things secure from bots by exploiting the ways in which most artificial intelligence operate. But yes, the whole process comes from 1997, and it started from hacker communities where you maybe remember Leet Speak. Well, Leet Speak actually served a function. So like LOL and OMG and all these things was so that the cops couldn't just automatically tell what you were talking about. They would have to like learn your coded language, which would shift and change much faster than they could possibly keep up with. But it's meant to encrypt the words specifically from computers. Because these are hackers, they're thinking already that their competition in law enforcement isn't some beat cop who's going to come on the boards and having any idea what's going on. Their real concern is, oh, they're going to have some sort of robot come in and read everything we're saying.
Their real concern is that there's going to be someone, probably a young lady in really quirky clothing and glasses, who could look at that computer and say, enhance, enhance, enhance.
That's CSI Miami.
That's every hacker from 1995 to 2023, brother.
And now for something completely unrelated.
Spam gets a bad rap. Not the concept of like email and stuff, but just the actual canned meat product, because you hear spam, you're like, oh, this is bad. There's a negative connotation. And I think like Galaxy Brain, I think we've had a bias in society against spam. I'm here for organ meat reclamation.
That is not
in the
what
culinary
spam
world.
is. That is not what spam is at all.
But it lives in a similar world as like a Scrapple or a Geta, you know, right? Like this,
or a haggis.
Or a haggis. I'm just saying, spam is your entry level into the world of nose to tail butchery, right?
So as the web develops, when Windows 95 came out, Internet Explorer was packaged for free. It was included. And so we went from like a couple thousand nerds on the internet to a couple million nerds on the internet pretty quickly using the World Wide Web. And that's the like web you remember, Jason, from your childhood, and anyone over about the age of 35 really remembers this weird Wild West of GeoCities pages and Angel Fire and
I remember being in Savannah, Georgia at my uncle's house, waiting 40 minutes, it felt like, for pictures of Usagi Yojimbo to scroll down and being like, this is everything I've wanted.
As more people are creating legitimate accounts, unsurprisingly, the volume of spam accounts increases. So the hacker community, having become influential in the Silicon Valley community by the middle of the decade, was like, oh, we should use something like LeetSpeak to throw off the machines so that these spam accounts can't be so easy to create. And CAPTCHA was simple. You used a machine to generate a solution that would prevent other machines from being able to solve it. It's always been automated. CAPTCHA has always automatically generated either the words or the images that it would not itself be able to figure out. Does that make sense?
So what you're saying is you allowed the machine to create the puzzle that the machine is not supposed to be able to figure out.
Correct. That has always been the case with CAPTCHA. Because
fundamentally, that sounds problematic.
It does sound problematic.
But then I also think about the fact that humans make up stuff that I can't figure out. So it just depends on who has the smarter machine, right? Like you're just betting on the fact that your problem is smarter than the other machine.
No. So you're confusing machine intelligence and human intelligence. And this is why this makes a good episode, because it's kind of a weird, sticky thing. The machine is generating an image that
no machines can read.
No machines can read, because all it has to do is take an image, usually something that it already has saved, and just go and skew it, and all of a sudden it can't even read. It's creating a code that itself it cannot understand.
It's doing something that we humans can't. It's dreaming in colors it can never see.
No. The critical thing to understand is how that is not at all what is happening here. What is happening here is you're getting machines to generate the solution because it is faster and cheaper. It has always been machine generated because it would just take too long for humans to do this.
Hashtag AI dreams of electric CAPTCHA.
Excellent. So the most popular, most widely used CAPTCHA software is called reCAPTCHA. So that was created by this guy, Louis von Ahn, Guatemalan researcher, who basically cracked this when he was like studying at grad school. He was like in his 20s. He was a baby in the mid 2000s. You also probably know his second company he started was Duolingo, but he sold reCAPTCHA in 2008 to, you want to guess?
As long as it's not Elon Musk, I'll be okay.
No, it's Google. So he sold it in 2007, to Google. And that's why it's the most popular CAPTCHA software, because you can get it for free from Google. You can just use it whenever you want. Now, you can get it for free from Google means what, Jason?
Google gets all of the information and access.
Google gets something out of it. One of them is data, right? But critically, at first, Google had a really interesting use for the reCAPTCHA, why they wanted it to be a freely available software. And that's because the New York Times had scanned all of the back catalog of the New York Times. But optical character recognition, it doesn't always work, right? Like if the T's smudged, it doesn't recognize it as a T. Best case scenario is 90% accurate, which if you took 10% of every word and you just dropped it, you made it unreadable, that would really mess with sentences.
Yeah, but you would absolutely pass that class.
You would still pass a class. I don't know.
90%, baby.
I'm going to tell you right now, as someone who has to mark papers that are definitely AI generated a lot of times, you wouldn't pass that class. I would be like, this is wrong. The idea was those squiggly, hard to read images got replaced for a long time with what looked like smudged type text. And that's because it was. So you and I and everyone else who used reCAPTCHA between 2008 and 2011, we were correcting the transcription of the New York Times digitization project. So we were all engaged in a massive crowdsourcing project where you and I were going like, well, clearly that's this. And we would type in the correct word that was being represented, and then that would fix the transcription that had been made. And now the whole document would be complete.
Why didn't we all get free subscriptions to the New York Times?
Well, that's the funny thing, Jason. None of us were asked if we wanted to participate in this crowdsourcing project, were we?
No, I just wanted to log in to beatbox.com. I can think of a good
Beatbox.com. Could have gone with Bandcamp. It was sitting right there. Vote Obama, Obama2008.org or something.
Didn't land the plane of that punchline. All right, continue.
It's fine. We've been engaged in multiple crowdsourcing projects through things like CAPTCHA that we had no idea about. Like, for example, and this isn't CAPTCHA, but this is the same guy, Louis von Ahn, Duolingo has been using your Duolingo, like you're working with this, if you're trying to learn Spanish or something, to translate text between languages on the web. If you go to Google, for example, and you look for a website not in the English language and you're a native English speaker, then you can automatically translate everything on the page into English. Right. Well, that gets corrected because Duolingo takes samples from those web pages and feeds it to you, person trying to learn Spanish, and then you, when you finish out your responses, when you translate the text correctly, it then spits it back.
But that feels like a positive symbiotic relationship to me. And I imagine that in the Duolingo sign up, there's probably something that everybody skips past that says it's going to use that data for that.
It's in your user agreement. It's in your user agreement that you didn't read.
I do sort of hate the fact that the fundamental subtext of almost all of this is that you can't trust anyone or anything, and that there's no way to actually protect you or your information or your sense of self.
It's a little ethically gray, but there's a huge benefit.
Yes, absolutely.
The CAPTCHA technology. And most recently, the reason why you've been identifying motorcycles and traffic lights and crosswalks is because we've all been training self-driving cars. We're helping self-driving cars identify what those things are so that when it's driving down the road, it goes, motorcycle, don't ram into it.
You know what this all genuinely reminds me of?
What's that?
There's a period where I was unemployed a few years ago, and was really struggling and had to just figure some stuff out. And I found myself deep in the waters of Amazon MTurk, which, if anyone is aware, the Mechanical Turk system. And what a weird couple months that was, of basically being a person being paid pennies for each individual opportunity to help train a lot of these AI stuff. And it was very much a million different versions of what you're talking about. So it's fascinating to have that context when now thinking about what CAPTCHA is doing and how that's an efficiency to try and do this information, and that there is this whole system on Amazon that I would say the vast majority of people have never heard of, that is a whole subculture for these weird, almost entirely dominated by like training AI or helping psychology students with their research papers.
And now for something completely unrelated.
That is a real carny move from the AI. Also, did you think this is where the world was going to go when you were talking to Smarter Child?
When I was talking to who?
Smarter Child.
Smarter Child. The
AOL Instant Messenger bot.
Yes,
your fake friend before Animal Crossing.
Oh man. Now, I mean, I remember in the late 90s there was that awful movie, I totally can't remember the name, where they created like an AI pop star or an actress, and then she became like way too successful, and I think Dustin Hoffman was in it. That's a really bad movie, don't watch that. But I was thinking about things like that, like the Turing test and all the idea. I mean, I was reading about the Turing test when I was 12 because I'm special. But like the whole idea that like you can't distinguish between a human and a machine.
I'm just saying that like there were years and years and years where it felt like AI was being trained specifically by talking to a bunch of emo kids on AOL Instant Messenger. And so maybe it's no surprise what the internet has turned into.
So CAPTCHA, right? It seems like a good thing, sort of.
It seems like a tool that has useful applications while also engaging in potentially ethically dubious research.
Right. It also has a bunch of problems to it, right? One, Jason, how does a blind person use CAPTCHA?
Yeah, I don't know. It creates an audio file. I don't know. They don't.
So audio is one way, right? But do you know how blind people actually use a computer?
I mean, I don't know.
There's a number of assistive technologies, but the screen reader is the most common. You would find it. I have I've had blind students in the past who, when we assign them a reading, for example, and it's on the computer, it's just a thing that, like you said, it just talks in their ear and says, well, it just says out loud. The problem is CAPTCHA is meant to trick machines.
Yes.
So if it's a machine doing the reading for you and it's using optical character recognition, the same technology we use to transcribe things, automatically, almost all the time, it has no idea how to interact with a CAPTCHA.
And of course, if it could know how to interact with the CAPTCHA, then inherently, if it could say it out loud, there's a workaround somewhere in the technology to then be able to figure out what it is and allow the bot into it.
Correct. If in order to make it accessible, you would have to effectively undo the whole feature of the technology. Yes. Right. It doesn't make much sense, but it means that blind people are cut off from a lot unless they have another human to assist them. There's some research done in 2022 about non-visual CAPTCHA on touch screens, but it's not.
Hey, that's what I was just talking about.
You were kind of just talking about that. Yeah.
Look at the hey.
So yeah, it's using vibrations and things like that. But then there's a limited number of machines that would work with.
Score one for the heat seeker, one step ahead of the research. I'm like the Aladdin of the internet world, one jump ahead of the lawman.
Oh God. Also, it doesn't work well in not English. So
I was going to guess that.
In Arabic, sometimes when it warps or the letters, it simply turns them into other letters. So it's really bad for your non-Latin alphabet, right? The other issue, of course, is that CAPTCHA is like stupid easy to get around. It's like really easy to break. So AI, there was an AI built that was able to just crack CAPTCHA, no problem, immediately. What year do you think that AI was built? When was an AI built that just cuts through CAPTCHA like a hot knife through butter?
All right. Well, if it was developed in 1997, the funny answer is 1998.
Guess what the real answer is?
1998.
It's 1998.
Booyah!
So obviously the CAPTCHA has become more sophisticated since then, but basically from year one, it's been a mutually assured destruction type escalation.
I was about to say, it's a CAPTCHA arms race for sure.
Yeah, it's just been an arms, thanks to arms race is what I was looking for. It's just been an arms race the whole time. But one of the funniest one is in 2004, Cory Doctorow, who is an author and sort of like one of the nerds who made like the early internet into a popular thing by kind of writing a lot about how cool the internet could be. He proposed an idea to use free porn sites as a way to crowdsource solutions to CAPTCHA prompts. So basically, you have a spam bot try to sign up for an account. It creates a CAPTCHA. You then forward that CAPTCHA to your porn site, and you have humans who want to get free pornography sign up, solve the CAPTCHA, and then that solution goes back to your spam account that you're trying to create over at, let's say, Amazon at that time. And it worked extremely well.
Well, I mean, one of the first things that I was ever told when I became aware of the world, I guess, was someone telling me that it's the pornography industry that almost always invariably is on the cutting edge of new technology and are early adopters of every mode and means of distribution. And that if you actually want to look towards the future of technology and of entertainment and media distribution, look to porn. And you see that over and over again, the whole OnlyFans model, etc. And then it becomes more mainstream, Snapchat, etc. But across the world. So it makes perfect sense to me that the endless supply of labor resource is people looking for free naked people on the internet.
People looking for free porn. Yeah. But speaking of the OnlyFans model, sign up for our Patreon. In 2022, very big story came out where GPT-4, which is the fourth iteration of ChatGPT, convinced a TaskRabbit delivery person to solve a CAPTCHA for it by claiming that it was a visually impaired older person who couldn't solve the CAPTCHA, and the dude just sort of went, yeah, whatever, and then typed the CAPTCHA in. But like the whole idea that like you can't distinguish between a human and a machine. If you sit down as a human and talk to a machine, and you talk to a human, and you can't tell the difference between them, then we can declare that computer to be artificially intelligent. But what's interesting about that story, to me at least, is like good guy human. You know what I mean? Like, oh, this blind lady, she can't solve the CAPTCHA. I'll just solve it for her. You know what I mean?
No, it's playing the metagame, right? Yeah. Like it found a way to play upon what we speak to mentally and emotionally in order to solve the problem.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of manipulation.
What I've sort of looked into is, well, what are people saying about CAPTCHA over the next 5 years or so, or in the future, in the tech industry, in the places where CAPTCHA is being used, and what can we kind of glean from that to get an idea of, okay, why do we keep using CAPTCHA if it is something that is, one, bad for blind people, two, is very easy to bypass, and three, it kind of racist against people who don't use the Latin alphabet. So I went to the creator first, Louis von Ahn, the guy who came up with reCAPTCHA. The last he sort of said anything about it was that he wanted to use CAPTCHA to, quote, fight crime in Guatemala.
It's very specific.
And then proceeded to not specify what he means. And I was like, excuse me, sir. So I was really like, what the hell could he be talking about? And it seems like he's got his motivation for both reCAPTCHA and Duolingo, creating both of them, is, quote, we waste so much time on the internet, end quote. And that he wanted to use crowdsourcing technologies as a method of making the time we spend on the internet more productive.
I mean, I love that conceptually.
I might see it that way. My only issue is that he's also the guy behind reCAPTCHA and Duolingo. So it's the guy who's like, that time you spend logging in to an account, we could be using those seconds. Like, you know what? We could be extracting labor that you didn't agree to. Like going back to the ethics of the New York Times. And then with Duolingo, it's like, you want to learn a language? Not good enough. That time you spend learning a language, that needs to be spent translating text.
Well,
I don't think he's a bad guy. Just it gives me icky vibes.
Which is totally valid. And I'm not arguing, and I don't know enough about him. I think it's interesting because I see it differently, because I think my mindset is more geared towards his, in terms of the fact, not about trying to exploit people, but the idea that I value how productive I have been with my time. And I literally have in the past kept 5-minute by 5-minute increment journals to make sure that I am being as productive as I possibly can with my time. But how you measure productivity to me is the real thing, because in my brain, what I considered lost time was the scrolling. So there's a version of what he's saying where it's sort of dark hyper productivity and like, you know, uber capitalist. But there's also a version for me where it's like really actually speaking to efficiency and intentionality.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. You're very optimistic in your view. I guess I'm not optimistic. So I looked then at, again, maybe some alternatives that are happening. So like CAPTCHA came out of a university study in 2022. It's called an adversarial CAPTCHA. So there's a bunch of researchers between China and I'm going to think that's the United States, but mostly in China, to come up with a better CAPTCHA that would leverage the existing CAPTCHA technology so that everyone could make a better system without having to completely replace everything. They could just effectively download a firmware upgrade and bada bing, bada boom. Now we have a much more efficient version of CAPTCHA. As soon as they developed a CAPTCHA, they made it open source. They released it to the public. And so it has had zero uptake with Google, Apple, and the largest internet security firm, Cloudflare, in the world. So about 90% of machines will never see a CAPTCHA. So a CAPTCHA really seemed like a good idea, and everyone can use it because it's open source. So if Google, Apple, and Cloudflare don't like a CAPTCHA, what do they like?
What they own.
Yes. And what do Google and Apple own that is maybe within your reach at this exact moment?
My phone?
That's true, right? The Android operating system represents the most popular operating system on phones. That is a Google product. And then Apple, of course, produces the iPhone, the best-selling individual phone in the world. How do you log into your phone?
Oh, my face.
Yeah, you face, right? I use my thumb. You use your face.
Oh,
fuck. So here's the great thing. The robots can't do that, right? They can't replicate, well, not yet. They can't replicate your face and show it to the camera on your phone. They can't do your thumb and show it to your phone. So what Google, Apple, and again, Cloudflare, which people not familiar is the largest internet security company in the world. A lot of the websites you use Cloudflare as their sort of security system. What they want to do is they want to take your logging into your device as proof that you're human, right? So it'll be proof your face, it scans your face, so you're already human. So anything you do on the machine after it scanned your face to log you in should automatically be considered human, right?
Sure.
So it will just push to every website you log into. Instead of you clicking on I am not a robot and solving a CAPTCHA, it'll just be like, no, he already logged in with his face. Don't worry about that. Any problems that pop up to you automatically when you hear this.
Yeah, these people never watched Mission Impossible.
That's not quite what I was going for, but that's an interesting, you're not wrong, technically. Any other issues that pop up?
Once I've logged in, yeah, well, I gotta be honest, there's a long list of Tom Cruise related issues that we could talk about. Wait for that think piece. But yeah, I mean, once I log in with my face, I mean, first off, what if someone's holding me hostage? And like legitimately, I wasn't thinking about that, but absolutely, like, you know, I can be doing that without my own free will. But more importantly, I guess once I've logged in, if there's not continued checks and balances, then we could just unleash my army of bots. In my head, I hope there's Z-bots because I miss them to then go and run through the internet passwords and do all the bad things and take all the concert tickets.
Yeah, so it's even easier to bypass because, of course, you would just need to have your spam bot exist on your phone and then log in with your face, and then ta-da, like, what the hell? That's number one. And there are ways around that. You can sort of limit the number of, like, after 10 logins using this system, it can be like, you need to reset. It needs to scan your face again. Blah, blah, blah. The other problem is, in order for the phone to tell the website that you're a human, it has to share the data that confirms you're human. So right now, when you log in with your face, your phone has your face. It has scanned your face. It knows what your face is. And that largely stays on the phone. It's also in your iCloud account, but it's, assuming you have an Apple phone. I'm just throwing that out there, but it stays on your phone. This means that every single website you ever log into in the world
has my face,
will have your face. Now, Apple, pretty good at security. Not too shabby.
I don't think the free porn sites do.
Yeah, that's right. That's one. But like I don't trust most of the websites that I go to have my face. Excuse me, you're going to go to x.com and you're going to log in and tweet and you're going to give that psychopath your face? Is that what you're going to do? Because that's an option.
I'm excited for all of us to appear in the background of Warner Brother Discovery crowd scenes going forward.
Yeah, nailed it. I mean, that's a great way to sneak around those contracts that they signed, right? Where they have to guarantee people get paid. Well, then screw it. We'll just source an infinite number of faces from out there, and then it won't be any problem at all. Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. And it means that we have in our future two options. One is that increasingly more companies like Google, Apple, and Cloudflare are going to try to do this device automatically logs you in situation, which means more of our data, including our most unique set of data, our face, which is necessary for facial recognition software to work anywhere, is that our face remains unique to us, but it's going to become extremely copyable very quickly under this new system. That's one way. Or two, you can just keep using CAPTCHA and spend no extra money and just keep on going, where people can sign up for Anti-CAPTCHA, which is a company that you pay $100 a month to, and they have people in, quote, developing countries who solve CAPTCHAs for you all day because, and I am again quoting from the anti-CAPTCHA website, $100 a month is a good salary in developing countries, end quote.
Yeah, it sounds like I bet they're on MTurk.
Yeah, I mean, basically. So where does that leave us?
A third option, Andrew. One where we raise a generation that won't take advantage of all of these things, and this kind of security won't be necessary, and we won't have to sacrifice the safety of our private data or the things that make us who we are in order to exist in the world.
It's not going to happen. As much as I might agree with you, what this tells me is all the stuff you were saying at the beginning about the robots dreaming in colors and that we can't conceive of, and Skynet and Terminator. No, Jason. None of that is what's going to happen. The dystopia that we get to look forward to, the actual dark AI nightmare that CAPTCHA indicates, is the most boring capitalist nightmare you can imagine, where companies are either too cheap to upgrade and therefore spam bots completely take over loads and loads and loads of websites and it becomes completely unusable, or the companies that do spend the money, they just reckless abandon march forward with use of artificial intelligence, and we stop having the ability to even, I don't know, have a face anymore that's unique to us.
Well, when the face stops being a usable security system, it doesn't mean that people won't then try and develop the next thing, right? Like, one thing that is, I think, very specifically human is that for the most part, as a species, we don't give up, right? Individuals do all the time, but as a species, as a society, we are constantly trying to solve problems. So assuming that, which often creates new ones, but that's kind of the endless cycle. So assuming the face no longer is a valid security feature anymore, in your guess, based on all the research that you've done, what is the next undiscovered country of personal information security?
And that's the problem. What is? Because
our DNA.
So that's one option, but also, like, I don't know, the microbiome in your belly button is unique, so we could do a little swab of your belly button, and then the little bacterial colonies that happen to grow in there will be completely unique to who you are, or something along those lines. Like, that's the thing, is it keeps becoming more and more invasive. The facial scanning was already kind of a weird invasive thing when it, like, people were a little worried when it first came out, but like, it's just going to keep it. This is just the cycle. This is the actual cycle. It's not the robots marching down like with the guns and setting off nuclear weapons. It's just that it becomes,
we get used to everything.
It gets increasingly more difficult to simply wake up, go to work, come home, eat a fucking sandwich, and go to bed. CAPTCHA is a great example of how the hoops have gotten progressively worse, right? We went from squiggly words to the fire hydrants and cars and whatnot. And most recently, right, the current wave of reCAPTCHA especially has been AI-generated images that you then have to identify. So it'll be like, click on all of the examples of a yellow T-Rex riding an ostrich like a horse, and you'll be like, what the fuck are you talking about? But the AI, of course, creates an image that it recognizes as that we don't recognize, which is also another problem. But that keeps happening, and it's only going to get further. Now that we're going to move into a post-CAPTCHA world, it's going to be one in which now it's just invasive to you as a person.
So assuming the face no longer is a valid security feature anymore, in your guess, based on all the research that you've done, what is the next undiscovered country of personal information security?
And that's the problem. What is? because
Our
and then
DNA.
so that's one option. But also, like, I don't know, the microbiome in your belly button is unique. So we could do a little swab of your belly button, and then the little bacterial colonies that happen to grow in there will be completely unique to who you are, or something along those lines. Like, that's the thing, is it keeps becoming more and more invasive. The
And
facial
intimate.
scanning was already kind of a weird invasive thing when it, like, people were a little worried when it first came out, but like, it's just going to keep it. This is just the cycle. This is the actual cycle. It's not the robots marching down like with the guns and setting off nuclear weapons. It's just that it becomes,
We get used to everything.
It gets increasingly more difficult to simply wake up, go to work, come home, eat a fucking sandwich, and go to bed.
Did learn a lot about what your dreams are like from that.
And now for something completely unrelated.
Going back to the fighting crime in Guatemala thing, he has, in the last few years, established a charity, the Louis Von On Foundation, which is specifically giving money to put like young girls into education and to promote small businesses run by women and the victims of like sexual violence in Guatemala. So like, he has put his money where his mouth is, to be fair.
You also have to wonder what specifically happened with regards to Guatemala. Like
He's from Guatemala, and I can tell you what happened in Guatemala. It's called the United States of America.
Yeah, it's just, there's always something very specific and personal that triggers this stuff. Like, I remember I went to a house called the Trundle Manor, which was like a museum of curiosities in this couple's house. You can listen to that episode of my previous podcast, Collected Possibilities. But one of the things that was on the wall was a ray gun specifically designed to disintegrate birds. And when asking why someone created a ray gun designed to disintegrate birds, it was because a flock of birds had murdered this person's family member, and so they declared vengeance on birds and created a ray gun to destroy it. And now that literal laser ray gun was on the wall of this house. And so, there's always a very personal story to these. After going on this journey, I'm always thinking, okay, like, what's the big picture takeaway? What's the top level overview having gone through CAPTCHA? And it feels to me like what I'm getting out of this is that this is yet another example that, while obviously security is important and necessary, and society as it functions requires us to have levels of security, that in the name of constantly trying to reinforce security, we are always giving up more and more privacy, personal rights, maybe even freedoms, not necessarily here, but in the future, that like that boundary between security and the feeling of security versus actually making ourselves more reliant and vulnerable and giving up ownership and access to systems and people and corporations. That is a lesson that can be taken from CAPTCHA and expanded to so many other things. It's not a slippery slope. It's a spiral that constantly happens, that the more that we invest in this and the more that we go down that path, the more we're actually giving up rather than gaining. Yeah. Because it becomes less and less effective, which means in order to keep going, it's the arms race, as you said, we're going to have to give up more and more of what we're trying to protect in the name of seemingly protecting it.
Yes. And it is, of course, a great example of security theater, where, it's just like when you're at the airport and you take your shoes and your belts and off and things like that. And you're like, what are we protecting? You're not protecting anything. You're just making people think that we're protecting something.
And to take that back, I remember you and I both went to the University of Maryland, and there was always a guard in this station where people, theoretically visitors, would come in at night. And that was the first time I fully understood the concept of security theater, where I was coming in and I was like, this person's not really taking down any information. There's nothing they could do. There's no way of tracking this. This is to make people feel like they are safe rather than doing anything, with the understanding that for people who are not super committed security theater is a real deterrent. You know what I mean? Like putting a sign up that says guard dog, whether or not there's a dog there, does work. It actually does deter people in the same way that a lot of people who might steal from your car simply won't if the door is locked, because a lot of people are very fundamentally lazy and will not put the extra effort or are fearful and will feel like it. It's really about then like recognizing that there's people who are super committed and that you can't necessarily stop with the theater. Again, the cycle, it's a spiral.
Cycle. Yeah. So it's this really weird thing that we all deal with every day. We all have to deal with a CAPTCHA pretty much every day. And it is getting to the heart of, a kind of a thing that we've been debating since at least September 11th, 2001 for Americans. Just what does it mean to be safe? And the answer is you can't really be safe. But how much energy you spend on making yourself feel safe, on deterring, as you said, the kind of the quote lazy criminals, so one way people tend to think of it.
What actually makes us safe or secure versus what we have been manipulated into.
Yeah. I think if I were to sort of final thoughts on a hopeful note from my end is that, one, we still have the ability to pull the plug on any of this. You can ask for, the EU, for example, is very much wary of Google and Apple's plan to use the device to automatically log in, and they are going to investigate it. If you're in the European Union, so if you're not one of the two people hosting this show, but if you're in the European Union, you can write to your members of the European Parliament and ask them to do something to maybe protect your facial recognition software, if nothing else. But, your private information needs to be contained to the device and not leak out from that device anywhere else. That's one thing that you can protect against. But also, if we go back to the original intention and the original story of CAPTCHA, of hackers trying to not be caught
fight crime in Guatemala.
And fight crime in Guatemala, we see the same spirit in what is a really good alternative or upgrade to CAPTCHA, adversarial CAPTCHA. It's open source. They're using the same mindset. Like, at the heart of the solution to the problems of CAPTCHA is if we work together and we do Creative Commons and we think about just like, I don't know, it sort of the solution to fear has always been like love, understanding, and trust. So if we put more out there with a mindset of love, understanding, and trust, like these researchers from China did when they came up with a better version of CAPTCHA, then that's really the best way to make sure spam bots don't overrun all of our accounts.
So here is my things that I learned today. I legitimately had no idea that we had helped fill in the gaps and the smudges of the New York Times back catalog. I think that is truly fascinating and really interesting to hear all of the different things that CAPTCHA does, and that the ability to process the combination of text and images as a communal experience is an important skill that speaks to our abilities of being human, but it is trained. And as I've read in the past, the ability to do that actually has to be trained at a young age, or it is harder to do and you can lose it. So comics aren't just for kids, but they're an important part of a childhood education to learn a brain skill that allows you to be smarter than the machine. Thank you for listening to another episode of this show as we put together a few things that were seemingly unrelated, but are actually all connected. Make sure you check out our Patreon. Go back, listen to previous episodes. Please absolutely tell your friends, your colleagues, your enemies, whoever you think could get a little bit of education and information and entertainment. If you want to go ahead and you listen to past episodes of my other podcast, Collected Possibilities, go check us out on wherever you get your podcasts or on Instagram. Andrew, anything you want to plug?
I think right now the critical thing is just to keep listening to this show. There should be at least 2 other episodes you can listen to right now. So if you enjoyed this, go listen to that.
And before then, Andrew, sing us out.
CAPTCHA. Seemingly Unrelated is a Life's Little Murder Boards production. Created and hosted by Andrew Johnstone and Jason Howard. Audio production and editing services provided by Naomi Cohn. Our artwork is by Megan Zemet. The theme song is Irizumi by Pistol Jazz. To find out more about everyone involved and access the show notes for this episode, visit us at seeminglyunrelatedpod.com.